In the first part of today's European Council summit in Brussels, the prime ministers and heads of EU member states dealt exclusively with a blocked 90 billion loan for Ukraine and the interruption of oil supplies to Slovakia and Hungary via the Druzhba pipeline. There was no progress in either case.
The fact is that at this moment, it's just knocking on the door, the shortage of oil globally. So the behavior and the strategy that Europeans have here is just crazy. So we definitely need Russian oil. We cannot survive this situation, which is getting more and more serious under these conditions, without involving Russian fuel energy. Europe cannot survive without that.
I believe that the situation can be resolved, and I think that resolving it requires flexibility from both parties. And therefore, from my point of view, it is necessary to reopen the Druzhba pipeline, and on the other hand, the 90 billion will also be released automatically.
In the first part of today's European Council summit in Brussels, the prime ministers and heads of EU member states dealt exclusively with a blocked 90 billion loan for Ukraine and the interruption of oil supplies to Slovakia and Hungary via the Druzhba pipeline. There was no progress in either case. The loan for Ukraine remains blocked, and no deadline has been set for the resumption of Russian oil supplies through this pipeline. In my speech, I informed about the declaration of an oil emergency in Slovakia and the practical difficulties caused to us by the Ukrainian president with his unilateral decision to stop Russian oil supplies. I reminded them that, according to the decisions of the union's bodies, Slovakia and Hungary have the right to off-take Russian oil until the end of 2027, not only through the Druzhba pipeline, but also by sea. The situation is exceptionally complicated by the military conflict in Iran, which hinders access to oil and greatly increases its price. I reiterated that it is strange that after everything the European Union has done for Ukraine, we, as a massive international organization, are unable to convince or compel Ukrainian President Zelensky to allow an immediate inspection of the allegedly damaged pipeline, its repair and commissioning in the shortest possible time. I asked whether we are that weak in the European Union, or if it is an intention to permanently cut off Slovakia and Hungary from the supply of this oil. I expressed my conviction that by constantly delaying the resumption of Russian oil supplies, President Zelensky is illegitimately interfering in the election campaign in Hungary to replace the current Hungarian government. Similarly, during the phone call with the President of the European Council, Antonio Costa, before the summit, I confirmed today Slovakia's readiness to take further measures against Ukraine if its political leadership continues to intentionally damage Slovakia economically. As is generally known, we have already adopted one reciprocal measure. We have stopped the supply of emergency electricity to this country. Under the given circumstances, dear friends, I fulfilled the declarations from yesterday's Integration Committee of the National Council, and on behalf of Slovakia, I refuse to approve the conclusions of today's summit, fully supporting Ukraine. This decision of mine expresses the position that relations between the Union and Ukraine, as well as mutual Slovak-Ukrainian relations, are not and cannot be a one-way ticket with the obligation to accommodate President Zelensky in everything and at any cost, while simultaneously being obliged to tolerate a lack of respect and intentional decisions by the Ukrainian president that damage the economic interests of European Union member states.
It was a bit bumpy, the car shook. Well, they weren't happy that we changed the decision made in December due to the Ukrainian oil blockade. But after the legal situation became completely clear that we have the right to do this, as the decision-making process was not closed. So the only thing they could do was to make some threats, and then they realized that this was not going to work.
What arguments did they use to try to convince you? And what were the toughest methods?
They didn't have an argument for which we didn't have a stronger one. I said that we stand by the December decision. If they had put Hungary under an oil blockade in December, we would never have agreed to this 90 billion loan. But after they waited for this positive decision and then put us under an oil blockade, they cannot ask me to act as if nothing happened. So we are compelled to this. We listened. No one asked him a question. We got used to listening. Did you hear anything about the government sending Hungarian soldiers abroad? That's nonsense.
What he mentioned is nonsense.
Yes, but with Donald Trump's help, it will change.
I stand for their interest. So what I have done here is to crush the oil blockade, which were imposed on us by Zelensky. So I defended the interest of the country.
And do you think you can win the election?
Certainly.
Energy supply from Azerbaijan, is it making any difference in current?
Yeah, that, absolutely.
And how it's going to expand this country?
Yeah, I had some conversations recently with the president of Azerbaijan as well. I have a direct contact with all the leaders of the region, Emirates, Qatar, and Azerbaijanis as well, and we continue to cooperate. They are not just good and nice, but they are really brotherhood to help Hungary under these circumstances. So we appreciate that very much.
How about abandoning Russian oil altogether and using this as a chance to go for oil from other countries?
So the fact is at this moment that it's just knocking on the door the shortage of the oil globally. So the behavior and the strategy what Europeans have here is just crazy. So we definitely need the Russian oil. So we cannot survive this situation, which is just under this condition is getting more and more serious, without involving against Russian fuel energy. Europe cannot survive without that. Probably now they deny that fact. It takes not more than 1 or 2 weeks. It will be obvious for everybody. Sorry? Yeah, they said it clearly. So here in Brussels, this is the opinion. It's more than opinion. It's their hope. They're working for that. So here in Brussels, many of them, especially EPP, think that the only way out of this situation is that the national government lose the election and the pro-Ukrainian government will be formed. And this new pro-European government, pro-Ukrainian government will follow the track which marching the others on, which means to give money and to give military equipments to the Ukrainians. So this here is not just a hope; it's a program, may I say. Even they finance the Hungarian opposition from here to change the national government for a pro-Ukrainian. That's so. It's obvious. So it's not a secret. It's not an unpolite something. It's demonstratively going on.
Therefore, are you saying Ursula von der Leyen is conspiring against you? You say they have a program, so you say
Sorry?
It's Ursula von der Leyen. You say they have a program. Who is the program? And would you argue Ursula von der Leyen wants you out of government?
All the European institutions, including parties and the Commission, would like to have a change in Hungary of the government, and they finance it, yes.
This is a very serious matter. Here's how the situation will proceed today. We listened to the reports from the President of the European Central Bank and the Eurogroup about the situation. The situation is unimaginably severe. In 2 days, the global energy situation has deteriorated as much as would have been unimaginable before. And today, the situation is such that the European Union is not in a negotiating relationship with the Americans, is not in such a relationship with the Russians, and is not in such a relationship with the Chinese. So if we cannot extricate ourselves from this isolation into which the bad policy of the Union has pushed Europe, then there will be big trouble, because such a crisis, such an energy crisis, cannot be managed without cooperation with others. This is the situation. So what they have done here is now steering us toward bankruptcy. Marcus, by the way, Hungary has something regarding Russian energy, when they have made some sort of detachment plan to the European Commission. The European Commission should rather give us their reconnection plan.
According to the information, the Prime Minister was so anxious during the video call opposition that they say he was pacing and his jaw was clenching in the meantime.
This is nonsense, too, in terms of refugees. Plus, there's the Iranian conflict, which the locals are also suffering from. We must prepare for mass migration. We talked openly about this morning, and it also turned out that there are member states that demand the Hungarian model, so that said that the newly created migration pact is worthless because it's not about keeping out the illegal ones, but they don't want to let anyone in, not even the legal ones. This is the Hungarian model. No one either. No. This is now 3 or 4 countries, but they are speaking openly about it, and we have agreed to continue this. And they announced that if there is mass migration, regardless of any EU regulations, they will not let anyone in, neither illegal nor legal migrants. So here, gradually, the Hungarian position is not just gaining recognition theoretically, but slowly everyone has to adopt it. I hope this doesn't happen, that a movement starts from the south. But here, they count on it as if it were written in a book.
I want to be clear because it seems to me there have been some somewhat forced interpretations. Nobody is obviously thinking about a military mission to break the blockade in the Strait of Hormuz. What we are questioning is when the conditions might be right, but reasonably in a post-conflict phase, how we can offer our support, clearly in agreement with the parties, to ensure and defend the freedom of navigation. After that, there is obviously a possible impact of the crisis also on the front migration, the subject of this morning's meeting of the like-minded countries panel, which then, through an Italian-Danish proposal, suggested including in the conclusions a very clear reference to the fact that Europe, also learning from the 2015 crisis, must today instead prevent a possible migratory crisis by further strengthening the defense of its external borders. The European Council has obviously reiterated its full support for Ukraine, the nation under invasion. Naturally, most of the discussion revolved around the block on the 90 billion loan by Hungary. I have also read some rather bizarre reconstructions of what I allegedly said, so I am happy to share with you what I reiterated because I had already said it. I believe that the situation can be resolved, and I think that resolving it requires flexibility from both parties, and therefore, from my point of view, it is necessary to reopen the Druzhba pipeline, and on the other hand, the 90 billion will also be released automatically, so I think that by working on it, a solution can be found.
Prime Minister, you said earlier that you understand Prime Minister Orban's view on Ukraine. How do you see the EU coming out of the issue that we're facing right now? And is there a future of the UK as such, where if the agreements, if the conclusions are not standing after, if leaders afterwards choose to completely disobey what they've agreed on earlier?
Well, I was saying to the Italian press, first of all, I never said what I read on the press. I never been speaking with foreign ambassadors as I've been reading somewhere. What I had to say, I said during the council. And in my opinion, the problem is solvable, okay? But it needs a political agreement. It needs flexibility from both sides. I think an agreement in which the pipeline in Druzhba is reopened on one side and on the other side Orban unblocks the 90 billions as he was agreeing with it and allowing it, even not agreeing, but allowing it, I think it is possible. So my call is for both to be flexible, but at the end of the day we need those money for Ukraine and we want to unblock them and we want to respect the decisions that we took.